There is a life that begins without announcement. No breakthrough moment, no dramatic confirmation, no sudden change in circumstances. It begins the moment you stop working on the law of assumption and start living from it. Most people never arrive here, not because they fail, but because they keep practicing what was meant to become natural. Tonight you are not here to learn something new. You are here to recognize what quietly takes over after the assumption has settled. Because the life that follows assumption is not louder than the one before it. It is calmer, more stable, and infinitely more free. Stay with me. What unfolds now is not the end of the journey. It is the point where the journey dissolves into a way of living. In the beginning, assumption feels intentional. You choose your thoughts carefully. You observe your reactions. You imagine scenes. You correct yourself when doubt appears. This phase is necessary. It trains awareness. It teaches responsibility. It reveals that consciousness is causal. But this phase is not meant to last forever. When assumption remains a practice for too long, it becomes effort, and effort subtly recreates separation. You begin to feel like someone doing the law of assumption instead of someone being the assumption. Neville never intended for imagination to become another form of mental labor. He pointed toward a state, not a routine. There comes a moment, often unnoticed, when repetition no longer deepens conviction. Instead, it creates tension. You may feel yourself checking whether you are doing it right. You may wonder if you are maintaining the state properly. You may fear that relaxing means losing progress. These are signs that assumption is ready to transform from practice into identity. Identity does not need supervision. You do not wake up every morning reminding yourself of your name. You do not rehearse being who you are. You simply move through the day as the person you know yourself to be. This is the same transition that happens with assumption. At first you remind yourself, then you catch yourself less often. Then one day you realize you are no longer managing it at all. That is not neglect, that is embodiment. Helene Hadsell lived in this embodied state. She did not visualize endlessly. She did not obsess over technique. She did not monitor her emotions all day. She assumed herself to be someone who won, and then she lived a normal life. Ordinary routines, ordinary conversations, ordinary days. And yet, life rearranged itself around her assumption with remarkable consistency. Why? Because identity had become fixed. And once identity stabilizes, reality stops negotiating. Now ask yourself gently, do you still feel like you are trying to maintain a state? Do you feel responsible for keeping something alive? If so, you are not failing. You are simply at the edge of a transition. Because when assumption becomes identity, the relationship with life changes. You no longer feel like a creator trying to influence external conditions. You feel like a participant moving inside a reality that already knows who you are. This is the first layer of the life that follows assumption. A life where vigilance dissolves. A life where effort gives way to presence. One of the most profound changes that follows stabilized assumption is the end of mental management. Before, the mind worked constantly. You watched your thoughts. You analyzed emotions. You interpreted signs. You corrected inner dialogue. This felt responsible, even necessary. But mental management is a temporary structure. It exists to support a state that has not yet stabilized. Once identity is clear, the structure is no longer needed. And when it falls away, something unexpected happens. The mind becomes quiet. Not silent, but unburdened. Thoughts still arise, but they no longer demand response. Emotions still move, but they no longer dictate identity. You stop asking, what does this mean? What should I do with this feeling? Is this good or bad? Because meaning has already been assigned. Identity precedes interpretation. This is not passivity, it is coherence. The mind was never meant to carry the entire weight of creation. It was meant to serve a stable center. When the center is unstable, the mind compensates. When the center is clear, the mind rests. This rest is often mistaken for indifference, but it is not indifference. It is trust. Trust that you do not need to micromanage reality. Trust that reactions are not emergencies. Trust that silence does not mean stagnation. This is why peace is not the reward. Peace is the environment in which life moves efficiently. From this environment, decisions feel simpler. Timing feels more precise. You stop rushing. You stop delaying. You move when movement is natural, and you rest when rest is appropriate. Time itself begins to feel different, not slower, not faster, aligned. This is the second layer of the life that follows assumption. A life without inner supervision. A life without constant correction. A life that flows because nothing is obstructing it. When assumption becomes identity, the change does not stay internal. It expresses itself quietly in relationships, work, and time. Relationships are often the first place where the shift becomes visible. You stop seeking reassurance, not because you become distant, but because your sense of self is no longer up for negotiation. You listen more. You explain less. You are not trying to be understood. You are simply present. This presence has a calming effect. People feel less resistance from you. Conversations soften. Conflicts lose intensity. Not because others changed, but because you stopped reacting from insecurity. When identity is stable, you no longer need to defend it. Work changes in a similar way. You stop pushing. You stop forcing outcomes. You do what is necessary without emotional attachment to how it unfolds. This does not reduce results, it improves them, because clarity replaces effort. Decisions feel obvious. Opportunities appear without chase. You find yourself in the right place without strategizing to get there. Neville described this as the world moving to reflect assumption. You are no longer trying to make things happen. You are positioned, and life responds to position. Time too changes character. Waiting dissolves. Urgency fades. You are no longer living ahead of yourself or behind yourself. You are with life. This alignment creates a sense of ease that cannot be forced. It arises naturally when resistance ends. This is the third layer of the life that follows assumption. A life where external systems respond smoothly because internal identity is no longer fluctuating. At the deepest level, the life that follows assumption is a life without constant self-instruction. You no longer need to remind yourself who you are. You no longer need to consume endless content to reinforce belief. You no longer need to practice techniques to stay aligned, not because learning has no value, but because you have integrated it. This is the moment many people quietly fear, the moment when the search ends, the moment when there is nothing left to apply. But this is not emptiness, it is autonomy. Neville did not want followers. He wanted individuals who understood imagination as reality and then lived accordingly. The ultimate success of assumption is not manifesting objects. It is freedom from dependence, freedom from waiting, freedom from needing proof, freedom from needing permission to feel stable. You begin to trust yourself, and this trust is not loud. It does not announce itself. It simply exists. From this trust, learning becomes optional, not necessary. Curiosity replaces urgency. Enjoyment replaces seeking. You engage with ideas because they resonate, not because you feel incomplete without them. This is integration, and integration is the true end of the journey. Now here, at the closing of this cluster, there is nothing you need to do, nothing to practice, nothing to fix, only something to recognize. You were never meant to practice being yourself forever. You were meant to arrive. If this way of living resonates with you, you may choose to stay aligned with this channel, not out of need, not out of habit, but out of recognition. Because the life that follows assumption is not a technique, it is not a philosophy, it is not a goal. It is a quiet return to living without resistance. And once you touch that life, you understand something simple and profound. You were never trying to get there. You were remembering how to live without negotiating your own reality. And that is where everything begins again, not with effort, not with proof, but with quiet certainty.